Hello and welcome to another weekly update. I am excited to be back on my video game, and back in Salt Lake City. So in this video, we are going to be talking about some quick ways where you can sort of begin to identify what weaknesses you want to be working on in your climbing. Obviously, this is a huge topic, so I'm going to give you a high-level overview and give you sort of some insight into what I look for when I begin coaching a new athlete or when I'm reassessing what an athlete needs to be working on. So we're going to get into it, but first I'm going to give you a really brief update on what's been going on with my climbing, just because this is what the weekly update is. It's a weekly update. So what's been going on with my climbing? I'm finally back to training. I was traveling to Ohio and then Portland for my own bachelorette party, which was really fun. And during that time, it was like a 2-week period. I think I got like 4 training sessions in. I was just traveling around a lot. In Cincinnati, I think I was on a new person's couch or something every night. It was a lot. I worked it out. It's fine. I knew it was going to be like that. But now I'm back to training and getting outside, and also just feeling really good after I put down that 12C in just a few short sessions right before I left for my trip. So I'm feeling psyched. I'm feeling ready to go rage on some harder rock climbs. And yeah, that's what's going on with me and my climbing. Just going to keep on rolling and get back to training. Now, let's talk about working on weaknesses and identifying them. So in climbing, we kind of have I'll say we've got 3 buckets, right, that we can sort of look at for weaknesses. You could probably call it 4 if you really wanted to, but these are sort of the things on a high level that you're going to want to evaluate when you're trying to figure out what weaknesses should I be working on that are going to be valuable. So first we've got mental game and tactics. How well are we staying focused on the wall? Are we always frustrated when we're trying to go climbing? Do we have an okay relationship with failure? How's our relationship with fear? All these things that might seem oh, that's just a mind thing. I'll just get stronger fingers and it'll fix it all. No, not the case at all. So we kind of have to identify what things about our mental game are holding us back. Additionally, tactics I kind of put in this sort of soft skills of rock climbing bucket as well. How good are you at memorizing beta? How good are you at parsing apart a route or boulder and figuring it out? How good are you at looking at a climb and figuring out the beta before you even pull on? So those are kind of those sorts of skills that I'm going to put over in the mental game and tactics bucket. Then we have strength, right? It's no secret that climbing requires strength. We need pulling strength, finger strength, general athleticism, all of these things. The common stuff you think of strong fingers, able to do a lot of pull-ups, blah. But there's other things too. We want to have a strong core. We want to be able to push. We want to be generally strong, well-balanced athletes, right? So that's kind of that strength and power bucket that's going to come to, down to more measurable physical numbers. Then, of course, we have technique and skill. And that's perhaps the most important bucket. I don't know. It's hard to say which one's the most important, but I would say lots of people have climbed pretty hard. I've coached athletes that have climbed V8 that can only do 1 or 2 pull-ups, right? So sometimes technique can override strength, and also just having great skills and great mental tactics can sort of override any strength deficits. That being said, technique and your climbing skills are super important. So these are things how good is our footwork? How efficient are we on the wall? How good are we at resting in the middle of something pumpy? All of these things that we kind of would put under the bucket of technique. So with all these things that we can sort of, evaluate and work on in our climbing, how the heck do we choose what to focus on? Because if you try to focus on 4 or 5 different things, if you have 3 mental game things you're working on, 5 different technique things you want to work on, and then also you're trying to hangboard 6 times a week to develop your finger strength, you're going to be spread way too thin. You're not going to be able to focus on one thing, and it's not really going to work out. So it's really important in a training plan to focus on a handful of things. Usually I would say when I'm writing a training plan, I'll give athletes, sort of at the beginning of their plan, I'll give them a bullet point of 2 to 4 things max that I really want them to work on throughout 12 weeks. And sometimes in different blocks, it'll be our big focus is this, our big focus is that, right? So it's kind of this, you want to have in your rough draft of what you're doing, you want to have your nice bulleted outline of what you're actually trying to work on and trying to get better at. And, you know, sometimes in many ways, the more specific you can get with this, the better. But you want to have something, you know, you want to have a plan. You want to know what you're working towards and why. And oftentimes the best thing to do, you know, with the whole low-hanging fruit thing, you're going to want to pick things that are going to make the biggest impact, right? It's like the Pareto's principle, where 20% of the factors will produce 80% of the improved outcomes. So that's what you want to do when you're picking weaknesses to work on. Now, let's go through these buckets and just sort of talk about what you might look for. So when it comes to mental game and tactics, I think usually you're pretty aware of these things, especially if it's fear related. So when it comes to like maybe topping out on boulders or taking lead falls or just getting comfortable with heights, all these things, if one of those is preventing you from going for it on the wall, or if you have like really negative self-talk, like maybe just take like 5 minutes and brainstorm any mental struggles that you have, because getting a handle on these things will be really valuable in understanding like what gaps are happening. And you can also think about it like this, like, you know, on the hardest rock climb you've ever tried, like what mentally felt like it was holding you back? Like, did you keep messing up the same part? Were you having trouble remembering your beta? Like, just think about gaps you can find, and kind of brainstorm. I do find that like, while as a coach, I, you know, maybe am better at seeing certain things because I'm in this outside perspective, a lot of times athletes are pretty self-aware of what they need to work on. So even if you don't have the eyes of a coach on you, you can probably figure out a lot of these things. And if you have a trusted climbing partner, maybe you make this list and you go, hey, these are some things that I brainstormed that I think I need to work on. Like, what do you think? And your friend might be able to give you some feedback. Obviously, go into this being open to feedback, right? You can't be like, give me feedback and then get mad and defensive. So keep that in mind. So that's kind of your mental tactics brainstorm. When it comes to technique, this, you know, it's easy to make technique evaluation really complicated. And while there is value and complexity when evaluating gaps in your technique, I would say one of the easier ways to figure out what's missing in your technique is notice what you like to climb on at the gym. So go to the gym and just notice, like, what are you attracted to? What do you feel confident on? And then notice the things where you're like, ooh, I do not want to climb that boulder. And notice that and make observations. And from there, you're probably going to be able to guess like, oh, I don't like these sorts of attributes, or I don't feel as confident on this type of terrain. Like if you're like me and you just avoid the slab climbs at all costs. Not really. I do work on it, but you know what you like and you know what is challenging for you and what you do not prefer. So if you can notice those things, you'll probably have a pretty good idea of where those gaps in technique are just based on what you prefer to climb on. So that's kind of my quick technique evaluation. And then another piece of that too is think about some of the harder climbs that you've done. So think about like your top 4 or 5 climbs you've ever done, whether it's sport, boulder, in the gym, outside, whatever it may be. Think about those things and just try to like think about the commonalities in those climbs. And maybe you have a wider variety up there, and if you do, like, good work, more power to you, but you might notice some common threads between those climbs, and that's probably going to show you what you're good at. And also it might show you sort of the opposite, like what are we not as good at? So take some time to brainstorm that. Lastly, when it comes to strength. So with strength, while there are ways to sort of evaluate, and I will link you to some cool information, I do love the Power Company database. They have collected data from over 400, probably more than that, athletes by now. And while it's not peer-reviewed data, it is cool to see the ranges they have collected for certain grades in sport and bouldering. So this can be a nice guideline if you just want a gut check of like, is my pulling strength where it needs to be, or do I have work to do? So you can use that as a guide, and I will link that in this newsletter because I think it's great and I think it's a good sort of gut check type thing. But when it comes to strength, a good indicator of whether or not you have a strength deficit potentially is what you typically do. It doesn't always work out like this, but a lot of times if you're an athlete that's maybe avoided bouldering, never participated in any sort of strength training regimen, whether it's related to climbing or in a past different sport, or you've never used a hangboard. Also, if you're like, you've never used a hangboard and maybe you've been in your climbing career for like 2, 3, 4, however many years, there's a good chance that some of these metrics might be on the lower end of things. Also, another just kind of side, I do notice as a coach that athletes that tell me I avoid crimpy routes, I do not like them. Many times, I don't have any data on this, but anecdotally, many times when an athlete tells me this and then we evaluate their finger strength numbers, weird, you don't like, it's kind of a vicious cycle, right? You don't like crimpy routes because they feel hard. You don't climb on crimpy routes, so your fingers don't get stronger. And then you just repeat, and then you develop a finger strength deficit, right? So while strength, you could definitely look at some things objectively and test yourself and do all this stuff. There's a good chance that if you haven't participated in particularly strength and power-oriented activities like trying hard boulders at a limit level, strength training, generally speaking, or hangboarding, that you might have some room to grow in the strength and power area, generally speaking. So lots in there, but I did want to give you a nice overview of sort of some ways to brainstorm what weaknesses you might have in your climbing. With that, I think I'll go ahead and close out that discussion. And I think if you have any further questions, please shoot me an email. I'm always looking for ways to make more content, and perhaps this video deserves another follow-up video next week. So if there's more you want to know or you want me to dig into something, do let me know. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and give y'all some fun announcements. So what I'm the most excited about is that next week, the custom plan sale, the summer training sale, if you will, officially opens to the public on Tuesday. Right now, spots are open to the waitlist, and literally, y'all, I woke up this morning after spots became available like late last night. I woke up this morning, 4 of the spots were already snatched and in my inbox. So the spots are limited. I do anticipate that this brief opening of custom plan spots will fill up my roster from now through late November, most likely. And I do want to note, so if you're like, ooh, I do want a deal on a custom plan, and I am giving some pretty sweet discounts. If you're like, I want one, but I'm not quite ready to start right now, that's fine. You can start anytime between July 1st and November 30th. So as long as your start date is going to fall in there, that's totally cool. And I've got 6-week plans and 12-week custom plans on sale right now. So I'm super psyched. The people that have already snatched up some plans are awesome. And it's gonna be a really great crew of custom plan roster athletes. So get psyched. And if you've been waiting to work with me, now would be a good time. So mark your calendars for Tuesday, where the sale officially opens to everyone else. And if you're on the wait list, I would grab a spot now before it opens to everyone, because I do anticipate that this will sell out rather quickly based on the fact that a lot of spots are taken in like 3 hours. So in any case, that's all that's going on right now. Check out the latest episode of the Average Climber podcast. We talk about habit forming, all that fun stuff. And that's about it for now. Hope to see you around here on this email update next week. And I hope you have an amazing weekend.